As soon as I saw this photograph, I knew it had all the makings of a good painting. It had colour harmony, composition, and the theme of the rural garden, the casualness of it. I just loved it. I sketched it out with a permanent ink pen to begin with. You don't need any special pen, just use permanent ink because I'm going to go over this with water. And I've gone now for a dip pen, and I'm using a permanent fountain pen ink for this. The dip pen is an old scratchy one, and actually that aided the work. It gives an imperfect line, and that really suited this rustic setting. So we're just getting in a general outline from a pencil sketch that I did. If you're not a sketcher, that's okay. You can use tracing paper. You don't have to have a lot of artistic skill to do ink line and watercolor wash, because as I said, you just simply need to choose something, a non-copyright photograph. This is a photograph by another photographer, so I've given them credit at the start of the video. Don't ever take anything off the internet assuming that it is copyright free domain. You need to check first. Now I'm going in with a liner brush, dipping it into water and just splashing that ink around, again aiding to that rustic effect. We don't want perfection when we're dealing with something that's rustic. We want to give the feeling of age. So just splashing the water around, making dirty marks, if you like, on the paper. You can see what a lovely composition this is, right from the very beginning. We've got a lovely balance, asymmetrical balance of nature. You don't want to line everything up in stiff, formal lines. There's a cottage in the background. We're going to keep it out of focus because it's at the top of the page. We're going to keep the focal point not a dead center, but off center, and just build up the whole work. I work all over the page. I don't finish any one area and then move to the next, because the painting is many sections of a whole, and you get a far better balance. I think if you've got something on the brush, you have a look where else it belongs. You can see the strongest contrast is slightly off center. We're only a seventh of the way into the painting, and you can already see a strong foundation of composition occurring. We're starting to do a little bit of scrappy detail. It's not a stiff detail. We're just putting a bit of rust into the cans, the tins. So you are looking for the pattern of light and shade. At the moment, we're looking at the paper is the lightest light, so we're working from the darkest dark down to the medium darks at the moment. And this quickly allows you to get your image, your foundation composition down. So I work from the darkest dark down to the medium darks, down to the medium tones, which are coming in now, where I'm adding more wash and spreading that ink around while it's still damp enough to spread. So even a permanent ink, you can move it around while it's still wet on the paper. As soon as it's dry, of course, it's permanent. Now I'm going in with a cadmium yellow or cadmium yellow light, and I'm doing a wash. Now watercolor wash, when it dries, will fade, so you can put it on a little bit darker or brighter than you want initially, because it will fade down as it dries into the paper. And this, of course, is the sun glow. It's not just a case of whether the cans are yellow. You can put yellow even onto a blue or a red can, because it's representing the sunlight on the can rather than the colour of the can. Where I have got the yellow can, I've gone into a stronger yellow. I've gone into the cadmium yellow deep, where the actual tin can will be yellow. So we've got the light coming through the trees, the sunlight hitting the cottage, even areas of light coming through in the sky there. So quite a little lot of the yellow here will represent light streaming through into this scene. We'll also leave quite a bit of white paper to represent the light where it's at its brightest point. Coming in now with a blue, and this is our cool colour. I'm working with a mop brush. It's a Pettigrew Pearl. Now I'm back on my sable brush. So I use a Pettigrew Pearl mop brush, which is a squirrel hair, and I use a sable brush for my detail. It has a beautiful point. You can use synthetic brushes, but they will not carry as much water. And I've had my sable brushes for decades. They'll almost last a lifetime, a good watercolour brush if you look after it. I'm most likely using a cadmium red there. They're permanent, very permanent pigments. Again, while it's on my brush, I look where else it belongs in the painting. I don't just finish off one area. I'm always working through the scene, looking at the whole painting as I work. So I focus on having a good composition before I start. I'm after a good pattern of light and shade and a good colour harmony. And there's the integrity also of the work, and that is working on something that's original. And if you do use the photograph by somebody else with their permission, give credit to the artist, because a photographer is an artist also. I'm working with Fabriano Artistico watercolour paper. It's a very high quality paper. And of course, having quality materials helps me do a good work. I know they say a bad workman blames their tools, but seriously, it is a lot easier to do good work if you've got good materials. I'm using my Merry Blue watercolour paints. Got them in a lovely palette here. It's a big palette. And I've mixed my colours together. I've dulled the blue that I was working out with, and I've just dulled it out by mixing it with my other colours that I'm working with. You'll find red and green will make a browny blue lovely tone. Just mixing your red in with your greens. Add a bit of blue if you want a blue-green. And I'm keeping that paper wet so that when I put the brush strokes down with the colour on, they will be soft edges. If you put wet paint down onto dry paper, you'll get hard edges. If you put wet paint down onto wet paper or damp paper, you'll get a soft edge. So if you're trying to do foliage at the back of the scene, you want it to be soft and smudgy and out of focus to suggest the aerial perspective. If you want it to have crisp hard edges like you might want to have on the cans, on the sharp sides of them, then you might want to put that down onto dry paper. You don't want the can colour. Like if you're trying to put a brush stroke of red down on the edge of a red can, you don't want to do it onto wet paper that's going to bleed out into the distance. I'm a little over halfway through the painting progress at this stage and still working with my pure sable brush. This is a Winsor & Newton Series 7 number 7 brush. This brush was actually designed for Queen Victoria. She was a watercolourist and she commissioned Winsor & Newton to create the best watercolour brush for her. And they say that the people who create this brush need to have a 7-year apprenticeship before they are allowed to make this brush. I've gone down smaller in size at the moment. It looks like I'm using a liner. It has longer hairs. It's great for flicking paint around. You can do all the painting with a larger brush if it's a watercolour and you have one of those beautiful pointing Winsor & Newton Series 7 brushes because they go right up to a very fine point. That's the skill of the brush maker, to be able to create a brush that's wider but comes to a precise point and doesn't lose that point when you're painting. So that's why it takes a long apprenticeship to have the skill to spin those hairs. It's all done by hand. It can't be copied by machine, and they create superb brushes. If you're keen to get one of those really expensive watercolour brushes, put yourself down onto some mailing lists by art supply sellers and wait until it comes up on sale, because quite often those good quality art materials will go on sale about once a year, and it's a way of accumulating some quality materials without having to pay the full price. About 2/3 of the way into completing this painting, you can see that I'm continuing to work all over the painting. While I have a colour out, a particular brush in my hand, I will look around and see where else I can work with that material, that particular pigment, that particular tone, with the particular brush I have it on. It's an efficient way of working, and you're constantly observing the whole painting, keeping it pulling together uniformly. Again, you're focusing on the patterns of light and shade. You've already planned the colour harmony, you've already planned the composition, so your main focus at this stage is the pattern of light and shade, of trying to make sure that your main focal point has the highest contrast of light and shade. So you need to decide which part of the painting is the part you want the eye to go to first, where you want your eye to go to second, and what the movement of your eye should be throughout this painting. You're guiding the viewer's eye through the painting. The little bits of marks on the ground, the twigs, the branches, it's all part of providing a pathway for the eye to follow. If you do a painting where you've just got one point of focus bang in the middle of the painting, or just off side of the painting, but it's just one piece of focus, your eye hits that and then it's got nowhere else to go. If you've got to do a painting where there's like movement throughout the painting, where your eye comes in and it'll look at one point immediately, and then it'll move around to another point, and it just finds pathways to flow throughout the painting, the person will stand there and look at the painting for longer and enjoy it. But if you just have the one thing in the painting that's the focal point, and you provide no pathways of contrasts of light and shade for the eye to follow, the viewer gets bored and moves away from the painting very quickly, doesn't stay there and appreciate it. So that's part of the difference between whether a painting works or not, is whether or not you've got all these viewing pathways throughout the painting for the eye to wander. Lots of little things to see, but preferably only have the main focal points in full contrast of light and shade. And your main focal point will also be where the greatest contrast of colour is also. And that's why these colourful painted cans are so useful for this scene. They provide the strongest contrast in this garden setting. So it's very important to keep the flower garden behind the cans out of focus, soft blurry edges to them. And there it is, and I was very pleased with this painting. It achieved what I was after, and I hope the tutorial was as helpful to you. The art style is called ink, line and watercolour wash.